Welcome everyone, and thanks for joining us for today's episode of Canal Days. As always, I am your host Carrie, along with my co-host, founder of Historical Tours of Greater Holyoke, Robert Camus. Our Canal Days series delves into the vast collection of historical sites throughout Massachusetts, with Robert's expertise of the local history as our personal guide. Each episode, we uncover history throughout local communities, highlighting historic landmarks and uncovering their seminal significance. Today's episode of Canal Days will be introducing and canvassing the Joel Rhodes burial site located in Pelham, Massachusetts. So, who is buried here?
Well, you said it. Joel Rhodes is buried here, and probably no one else. And so I was able to visit the site. The gravestone is still there. But is there anyone else? I don't know. I found a stone that looked like it could be another one. It looked very peculiarly like a limestone that had been cut to the shape of a gravestone. So today we're going to talk about why they buried him here, where was his wife buried, and then where was he moved to, and then why did he leave the gravestone here? Very interesting. Well, Joe Rhodes was a farmer. He came into this area to bring up his expanded family, and he would die in 1864. I think he was only 58 years old. One of his sons had gone off to the Civil War, and he had other children too. And his wife was Lucy Rhodes, and they would have a farm right along this property. And the farm was very close to where Daniel Chase Highway is, about 250 yards north of where you have the meeting house, the Pelham Historical District, and the old-time Pelham Hills Cemetery. And so we're going to talk about a very interesting person here.
And reveal why he is buried here.
He has smallpox, and if you have smallpox out in these small towns, they didn't have pest house to bring them like a lot of cities did. They would have to keep them maybe in the barn because he couldn't be in the house with the people in his family would catch it. This was during the time of the Civil War, 1864, and no one wanted to go near him. And so what they did, they dug a hole as big as a bed. They lifted his whole bed, probably just the mattress, probably not the bed spring, and they probably covered their faces for very strong men, took them out to the back of the property, and buried him in a hole. He probably had smallpox, and they to such a degree that they were very scared. It's a very contagious disease and a very deadly disease. There is another situation in Pelham called the Reuben Allen Cemetery up on Mount Lincoln, where the daughter in a family of only 10 years old was buried in a similar way by her family, and Pelham refused to bury the child in one of their regular cemeteries. They probably refused here also. But they also did one very strange thing also. They forgot to write down his death certificate. So Joel Rhodes does not have a death certificate anywhere in Massachusetts. So I've searched and searched, nothing to be found. July 6, 1864, Pelham, surrounding towns, cities nearby, nowhere in Massachusetts is there a death certificate. And death certificates were required and were very standardized from 1841 onwards. And so I could find it to verify what had happened to him. And this was definitely his property because I looked at the maps and found that out.
And stick around, and we'll be right back after this quick announcement. Are you fascinated by local history and eager to investigate the obscure treasures off the beaten path throughout the state of Massachusetts? Or maybe just seeking an unforgettable cultural activity for family and friends to enjoy? Look no further than Historical Tours of Greater Holyoke. Founded by Robert Camus. With over a decade of experience, Robert offers captivating tours and presentations of historic sites and landmarks throughout the state. Whether you're interested in canals, cemeteries, charming churches, or more, Robert's tours provide a unique and enriching experience for all. And that's not it. You can also schedule private tours tailored to your interests, ensuring a personalized adventure and unforgettable memories. Perfect for families or groups of all sizes, making for an exciting hands-on learning experience that brings history to life. Simply visit holyokecanaltour.org or email bobcat4214, capital B, at yahoo.com to book your private tour today. So getting back to our episode on the Joel Rhodes burial site in Pelham, Massachusetts, can you clarify where his wife was buried?
His wife was buried not with him. And that's very important to know, because his wife was buried in a place called Pelham House Cemetery, and she got a stone for herself. Now, that's where she was buried originally. So, both he and his wife, are no longer in the cemeteries that they originally were buried in. They were moved, both of them. So separate cemeteries, and at least one of their sons was also buried with her in that Pelham House Cemetery. But that's a cemetery that no longer exists. That's a cemetery that was in the Quabbin Valley and had to be moved in the late 1930s because any burials of people inside the Quabbin Valley had to be moved. Most were moved to the Quabbin Park Cemetery, but she was not. She was moved to another cemetery within Pelham.
And where was he moved to?
Okay, he was moved to the West Cemetery, which is also called the Cook Johnson Cemetery. It's 200 feet off the road, also hard to find. And she was moved also. So they're finally together, and they have a gravestone that was probably with her burial. I'm going to verify that. So they're in a cemetery together with their sons, and that means they had to go into the ground and take his body out, and he was a sole burial. And they had to, of course, take her and probably the son also, depending when he died. So what a move, and they're finally together, even though it wasn't planned that way.
And disclose why they left his gravestone there.
All right, so her gravestone was moved. His cenotaph gravestone, which was the same stone as hers, was moved. And it was moved into the West Cemetery with the two bodies. His body was taken up and put into the West Cemetery. But he left his gravestone there. And the old Quabbin cemeteries are taken out. The workers were required to write down data beforehand of what the cemeteries looked like, data of the moves on an index card, and a photograph of every stone they found. So his stone that was in the woods by about 50 feet has a photograph from 1938, black and white, taken by the Quabbin Park workers. On the bottom of that stone, there's a sign next to the stone that says 1326. That's the number of the stone. It was photographed December 20th, 1932. And it says Joel Rhodes, Pelham, grave 75 feet west of the station, 406 plus 95 on the Dan Shays Highway. Photo, Pike, LB 1326. That matches the sign's number that's right next to him. And the picture is in the middle of the winter. It says no release, no representation. That means it was not released to a family. There was no representative from the family there, but they knew very well that his stone as a cenotaph was in the Pelham House Cemetery. When they knew that a person had two stones, they took the more recent stone and moved that one only. And so his original stone stays in that location. And so you have a very unique situation. Dies of smallpox, buried in the back of a farm, gets a stone put up, faces the correct direction towards the west with the inscription. His wife is buried in Pelham Hollow. They get moved in the 30s, and since his name was already on the stone, his stone remains a solitary stone off the side of the road. When they found it, it was 75 feet from the highway. It's now only about 40 feet from the highway because the highway was expanded. Incredible story, and so I hope you get to see his stone now that's outside the highway and the one that's in the West Cemetery. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us for our episode on the Joel Rhodes burial site in Pelham, Massachusetts, and joining us on our journey through the rich history of the Connecticut River Valley. We hope you enjoyed uncovering some of the hidden and overlooked marvels and their fascinating stories that shaped our past in the state of Massachusetts. A special thanks to Robert Coleman, founder of Historical Tours of Greater Holyoke, for sharing his passion and expertise with us. Remember, you can find more information about Robert's tours, book private tours, and explore the Canal Days video and podcast series at holyokecanaltour.org. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, comment, and share. We'd love to hear your thoughts and suggestions for future episodes. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to tune in to our next episode of Canal Days. Until next time.